Okay, so I am back in New Zealand, and from ancient sites with interesting energy, this week's vlog is shifting to something a bit more mundane. This week's topic is what is the best kind of footwear to wear when you're practicing Qigong. And there might be a little bit more to discuss about this than you might think. So, Qigong. What is our purpose when we're doing Qigong? Obviously, it's to work with our energy. And as much as possible, it's to work with our energy in natural ways. And so the natural thing that people sometimes think of in terms of what would be best for their feet is to be barefoot. If that's what you have thought, you might be interested to find that almost all Chinese Qigong teachers would be horrified at the idea of doing Qigong in barefoot. So let's look at that in a little bit of detail, why it might be useful to practice in barefoot and why maybe not. Why, traditionally this is not considered to be a good thing. So I did think a little bit about whether I should horrify you by having you look at my bare feet, but I figure for the purposes of illustration it's a good idea. So our feet are designed to move in all sorts of directions. This movement, contracting, moving the feet, there's all sorts of bones and muscles, and this is actually really, really important for a couple of reasons, both in terms of subtle distribution of the weight of the body, and also in terms of the stimulation of the energy flow up through the body. As these muscles contract and move, they have a large effect on the energy moving up through our body. So when our feet are bare, obviously this allows them to move most freely. I'm exaggerating this a lot, obviously, as I move my feet, but this allows full freedom of movement, full movement of the muscles, which is going to affect our weight distribution, and it's going to help the energy to move freely through the rest of our body. In addition to this, it's going to create a natural connection with the ground. So quite aside from weight distribution, when we have our feet on the ground, we're making a connection to other aspects of the energy, the electrical energy and so on, and having our feet bare is going to allow us to connect with that. So it sounds pretty good so far, practicing Qigong in bare feet sounds ideal in order to get the most benefits. But there are a lot of situations where it actually turns out not to be ideal. And this is because if your feet are in a situation which doesn't allow them to relax, far from having a better connection with the ground, it actually creates a worse connection with the energy of the ground. So examples of this would be if you're on a very hard surface, your feet are going to tense up, and this is actually going to break the energy connection. Similarly, if you're on a very cold surface, rather than all the blood vessels and nerves relaxing and being able to have a good connection with the energy of the earth, your feet are going to naturally squeeze, and this is going to lift the energy out of the feet, and you're not going to be able to connect properly with them. Another one for this is if you are on a some kind of surface where there's the sharp thing, that's another one, or where there's some kind of contamination or pollution. Again, your body is either going to tighten up to stop you from taking that contamination or pollution in, or even worse, if it is relaxed and you do allow a connection and you do actually let that come into your body, that's really, really going to be potentially detrimental to you. And so this is why, for these variety of reasons, generally it's not recommended in China to practice in barefoot. They always recommend wearing shoes. So clearly there's some nuance around that now though. If you are in an environment where the ground is clean, it's not too hard, it's not too cold, great, practice barefoot. That's awesome, you're going to get a lot of benefit from that. But there's lots of other situations where it's actually going to be really useful for you to wear some shoes. So what are our other options then? Well, one option would be to find some shoes that as close as possible mimics the look and feel of just being barefoot. So these are some toe shoes, or the brand name is Vibram 5 Fingers. I will put a link to where you can find some of these in the description below this video. And yeah, they do kind of give you a feeling pretty similar to being barefoot. You can still move quite freely, so at least you get the motion thing pretty good. They do have a rubber sole, so you're not making that natural connection with the earth. So they have a lot going for them. But to be perfectly honest, in my opinion, they're more hassle than they're worth most of the time. They take a while to put on. You've got to put on the toe socks first and get all your toes in the right place, and then put your toes into the individual slots in the shoes, and it kind of feels natural, but not quite. And they're cool. They're a bit of a gimmick. To me, they don't offer all that much advantage over some other simple shoes that are going to help protect your feet, help them to relax, have a good connection with the ground, and move relatively freely and naturally. So what criteria should we have for a more simple kind of shoe, if we don't want to go all the way to the gimmick of toe shoes, that is going to help us to get the most out of our Qigong practice, if barefoot isn't suitable for our particular practice environment? The main criteria are flat soles. Yeah, the angle that our feet are at has a big effect up through the rest of our body, and we want to have as natural body mechanics as possible, so a flat sole. We also generally want that sole to be quite thin, again, so our body mechanics can be natural, and flexible. So as much as possible the foot can still move. Each toe may not articulate fully, as in the toe shoes. To be honest, they don't articulate fully in those toes in the toe shoes anyway, that's why it's kind of a gimmick. But overall the foot can tilt and twist and flex as it needs to, as it moves. There are a few options for these. You can get some the special shoes which have a cotton sole underneath them. And these are great because you also have that conductivity in terms of making a good healthy connection with the energy of the earth. However, they do wear out really quickly and tend to be a bit slippery. So, you know, if you're comfortable with that, them wearing out, and maybe you're on a surface where it's not going to be too slippery for you, that might be something you want to check out. But otherwise it's going to be something else, and I am going to let you in on one of my little secrets of the shoes that I use most often. I go all the way to this very salubrious location here, and I buy them for the grand price of between $3 and $10. These shoes fit our criteria really well. They're thin, flexible. These ones are a bit dirty because they're a little bit old, but they look quite neat and tidy. You can move really well in them, and it just so happens that they turn out to be some of the cheapest shoes you can possibly buy. So you might not have a Kmart near you, but I bet you have something similar, and you can get shoes similar to these. So sometimes price does not always indicate the best thing. Often it does. But sometimes some of the cheapest things actually work out the best. So these personally I find to be a great option for my Qigong practice. Okay, so moving on from that, what are some of our other options? Well, there are some quite specialized martial arts shoes. I'm not going to look at those. To be honest, none of them I think are better than the cheap ones from Kmart, although they can be a bit fancier and look a bit fancier. But another option is this kind of shoe, and these are the ones that really create some frustration in me sometimes when I see different masters wearing them for their practice. Now, in terms of being adaptable and being able to do your practice in different kinds of shoes, that's great. But if you wear this kind of shoe as a habit for your practice, it's going to cause some problems over time. And that's because the shoe has a heel. It pushes your heel up, which then changes either the angle or the tension that goes through your back. It changes the tilt of your pelvis, and it throws those natural body mechanics out. And when I see people practicing in this kind of shoe, and you can see very clearly the effect it's having on their body mechanics, it just makes me want to shake my head. Now, look, this is not to judge anyone who might need to wear this kind of shoe for a variety of reasons. Maybe it's all you have available, that would be a good reason. But also if you need, some issue with your arches of your feet or something like that, do what you need to do. But in preference, these shoes are not great. People think they're a sports shoe, therefore they're going to be good for all sorts of physical activity. No, really not. They throw all your natural body mechanics out, so I do not recommend this kind of sports or running shoe for Qigong practice. So that pretty much covers the types of footwear you're probably likely to frequently be inclined or think might be a good idea for Qigong practice, but we will look at a few others just for reference. So another kind of shoe you may want to wear at some times for various reasons would be some kind of business or business casual type of shoe. Again, maybe that's all you have available to you, or maybe you're in your office, and in which case great, still do your Qigong practice in this kind of shoe. They're not ideal though, and the reason for this is often they tend to be quite tight around the foot. Often they have at least a small heel on them, which is less than ideal. But the big thing is, these soles tend to be quite stiff. So the foot can't really move naturally. So if it's all you've got, of course, you're better to do your Qigong practice in these than not to do it at all. But they're really not ideal if you have another option. Moving along. Oh, same kind of shoes I showed before. I was going to talk about high heels. I will talk about high heels, but for some reason I didn't have any at my disposal, so these ones are standing in. And you can think of these as kind of being on a spectrum, right? It's about that heel. If these have got a heel on them, think of these as little mini high heels. Obviously big high heels, that's going to exaggerate that even more. It's going to throw the angle of your pelvis out, the tension through your back, the support through your knees, things like that. Again, some benefit maybe in doing Qigong in them. Yeah, but not ideal. Best not to if you can avoid it. And finally, last but not least, work boots. Now, interestingly, in my experience, these ones are very worn out. You can see these have had a lot of wear. I need to throw them away. I've actually just been holding on to them, waiting until I make this vlog. But in my experience, work boots aren't as bad as you might think for Qigong. Often, so they might have a small heel, but not as much heel as a lot of other kind of shoes, because when you're working hard in a hard physical job, you actually need relatively natural body mechanics. If your body mechanics go too far out, it leads to more injuries. So often work boots actually let you keep relatively normal body mechanics. Also, the way they fit is often they allow quite a bit of room for movement of your foot inside, so the foot can still move. So that's a plus as well in terms of your Qigong practice. The main downside then is they tend to be quite heavy. And so this is going to affect any kind of Qigong where you're having to lift or turn your feet. And so that's going to make it not ideal. But you can probably do quite a lot of practices quite well in these without them interfering too much at all. And again, if there's a choice of do your practice or not, you're still going to get a lot of benefit even if your footwear isn't ideal. Okay, so hopefully that was an interesting and maybe even useful look at some of the issues with different types of footwear for Qigong practice. A lot of you are probably already wearing really good shoes for your Qigong. Maybe for some of you it's given you some thoughts about the kind of footwear that might be better for your Qigong practice. So you can see on the vlog we might have a diversity of topics, from the exotic sometimes and exciting to the rather mundane, but hopefully still useful, and maybe even occasionally the profound. So if you enjoy this vlog, maybe you could like the video, comment, subscribe, share, things like that, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.